Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for logging on today for Proven IT's cybersecurity event. Just wanted to kind of run through the agenda today. Brief introduction is that I wanted to thank April Jordan and Kevin Yauk from North Cook Intermediate Center in helping us put the event on and posting it on their website, and also Eric Santos from the Learning Technology Center of Illinois. So the focus of today's event is on cybersecurity, and Proven IT, we're a full MSP provider. So I'm going to have two of our experts today join us to share with you some information on what to expect, what the landscape looks like for the future. Not specifically focused on education, but a main focus of today will be on education. However, this can apply to any organization. So I'm just going to turn this over to Mike Schick. He's our executive VCIO, and he will take it from here.
Thanks, Tracy. Welcome, everyone. So brief history about myself. I've spent the last 25 years in organizations in a technology capacity, focused on security and process, and have had an opportunity to work around the globe in different industries, serving in security roles, privacy roles, variety of data protection committees. So I've had some experience with security, and I've watched it evolve from, I'm going to date myself here, but there was a movie called War Games back, I think, before color television. But the idea back then was that you could take a modem and dial in and break into a company, and next thing you know, start a world war. So if you're a younger person and want to see how far security's come, look up the movie War Games, and it'll give you a good snapshot of that. Back then, it was firewall, you had an antivirus software, you had a tape backup, and you're good to go. I know we have a lot of senior IT folks in the audience, so I don't need to tell you that if you operate in that way today, you've got all kind of risk, identity fraud, fines, litigation, reputational damage, etc. The legacy tools that used to be pervasive were reactive, right? You'd get a virus and then say, oh shoot, I better scan it. But it's already in at that point. The tools we're going to be talking about today, and just the environment, I think, that we'll be talking about today, is a much more preemptive, intelligent, predictive environment, where we're trying to assess the environment and make either automated or manual decisions on it before we're at the point where we need to scan files, and we've already got the enemy, so to speak, has already gotten inside the city walls. So as Tracy said, we're going to focus on education. I know that's what many of the folks here are from that sector. What are we doing to protect our schools? What more can be done? So right now, let's just start by taking a look at the sector. So the education system has been a growing target for cyber attacks in recent years. I think that the industry itself, or the sector itself, is really a perfect target for cyber criminals. If you think about it, there's a lot of really private, personal, sensitive data that, if stolen, can be used for all type of nasty activities. Schools have not, at least historically, been known for their hardened cybersecurity platforms. They're known as places of education. They generally have smaller IT teams and constrained budgets. And then you throw a global pandemic on top of that forces everyone to work remotely, and you have an environment that's ripe for attack. So the first bullet on this slide is there's a company called Security Scorecard. They're at www.securityscorecard.com, and they're kind of an industry leader in rating environments. That's really what they do. So in 2018, they ran a broad study across 17 distinct industries. And the result of that was that the education sector ranked least secure of all of the 17. Now, this was 2018. We were rolling in, getting closer to this pandemic that happened. So you can imagine the escalation that occurred. Fast forward a couple of years to 2020, and you'll never guess, that calendar year saw record-breaking number of publicly disclosed cybersecurity incidents. The K-12 Cybersecurity Center is kind of the source in the United States for publicly disclosed school cybersecurity incident data. It's a mouthful. The punchline is that there's a K-12 cyber incident map. If you were not familiar with it, it's www.k12 letter K number 12 and then the word 6. So www.k126.org/map. It's kind of a neat site to familiarize yourself with. That's where everything that goes down in the education system that gets reported is put. So based on the 2020 data, there were 408 cyber incidents across 377 school districts in 40 states. That was up 18% over 2019 and amounted to a rate of more than 2 incidents per school day for the entire year. 1 year later, the education system started to catch up a little bit, and the incidents went from 408 to 166. So you're thinking, okay, we're making some progress here, but ransomware attacks jumped that year from 50 the prior year to 62. So are we improving? Are the threats evolving? I think it's probably a little bit of both, and it's something that's probably just going to continue to evolve on both ends. So if you have a data breach, what does that amount to in dollars and cents? You know, it affects taxpayers, it affects whole communities, really. In 2020, the average cost of a data breach for districts and other education organizations in the US was $3.79 million, which is astounding. That's according to IBM's annual report where they put that out. So the reality is that cybersecurity events in the education sector hit record highs in 2021, are expected to continue in 2022. Okay, so we know the threats are real. We've made some progress. There's still some work to be done, but what are the threats exactly? I don't think it's going to come as a huge surprise to anyone in this audience that we've got the big three here: phishing, DDoS attacks, and ransomware. Phishing is, you know, an oldie, but definitely not a goodie. It's a massive pain, I'm sure, for many of you in the audience. This is where the fake email gets dressed up to look legitimate and seeks to have you click a link, enter credentials, engage in some way. And once you've made that first mistake, there's all kinds of nasty business that they can run in the background, these attackers. Maybe they're loading a hidden program onto your computer, and now they're going to record all your keystrokes and send them to a central repository where they can monitor what's being done and or what type of information you're passing out to the internet. Maybe they're collecting all the personal information you have in your contact records to be sold on the dark web. Probably all of the above. You know, the punchline is once you engage in a phishing email, the bad guys are up to no good, and most times you're not even aware of what they're up to. An example: when a small district in Texas, the Banner Independent School District, compromised by phishing scam in January 2020, the local news station in the area reported that it cost the community, and it was interesting that they referred to it as community, $2.3 million. So how prominent is phishing? 90% of cyber attacks in schools start with phishing campaigns. How about this distributed denial of service, or DDoS? As the slide says, this is the intentional paralyzing, I like that word, of a computer network. So distributed, many attack points, all going at the same thing. The goal here is to disrupt service by overloading what's known as domain name service, or DNS. I'm sure a lot of you know exactly what that is. For those that you don't, it's basically a map of how all the computers and devices talk. And if you take that down, nothing on your network is going to work. I guess we can get into IP, and I'm sure there's folks in the audience right now saying, well, these things will work. But generally, nothing's going to work. The services aren't going to be able to be provided. Interestingly, NetScout, who, for those of you that don't know, is a major network security provider, released its biannual threat intelligence report. So to give you a volume of these attacks, and these aren't specific to education, but the number is staggering, so I wanted to share it. The total number of DDoS attacks during 2021 was 9.7 million. So to break that down, that means there's a DDoS attack occurring every 3 seconds. Bam, another one just happened right now. That's wild to me. Higher education, focusing just on education, they had 102% uptick that targeted colleges, universities, and professional schools compared to the prior 6 months. So again, you're living it probably, but you get into this remote work environment when you're not ready. From an IT perspective, you're not hardened, and these are the type of exploitations you're going to see happen. Last on the slide to the right, everybody's least favorite friend, ransomware. This is the software that gets loaded onto your computer, maybe through a phishing attack, and then locks your computer and says, you have to pay us this money, or you're not going to be able to access your computer. These types of attacks are the new norm, and schools have paid, in some cases, dollar amounts ranging in the $1 million range. So in the States alone, public through K-12 schools represented about 28% of all reported ransomware attacks. And that figure doubled to 57% by the end of that same year. So first 6 months, 28% of all ransomware attacks were in the schools K through 12. Second half of the year doubles. Again, I think a lot of this all ties in to the kind of the chaotic nature of how we moved into remote work, and I feel for all of you that had to deal with that in real time. Another example, March 2021, Miami Herald reported that Broward County Public Schools could not pay a $40 million ransom, and the 26,000 stolen files, which included student and staff social security numbers, addresses, birthdays, probably more, were all published online. As of August of 2021, ransomware attacks have disrupted 58 education organizations and school districts in the US, including 830 individual schools. So we know the education sector is under attack, and we've just finished talking about the 3 primary attack types that come. So what can we do about this? So we've got ironically, really kind of a 3-legged approach, 3 legs to a cyber stool, if you will. The first of which is cyber insurance. Now, before I talk a little bit more about it, let me start by saying that if you don't have cyber insurance, what you should do after this webcast is go call whoever you need to do on your end, or your insurance provider, and inquire about it. And even if you do have it, make sure you understand the details of it. So for those of you that are in any way new to this. Cyber insurance is exactly what it implies, provides coverage in the event of a cyber attack or data breach. Coverage is probably not included in your general liability insurance policy. This kind of coverage can include help to investigate, manage legal fees, fines, paying ransom, recovering equipment, public relations support, which I suppose could be necessary, and other things. Anything related to that is where you'll get that coverage, and it could be critical if this ever happens. Growing prevalence of ransomware due to remote learning has changed the landscape of the cyber insurance marketplace dramatically, though. These insurers have hiked their cyber coverage and retentions while lowering limits. Underwriters are now requiring more security controls in many scenarios as well. It's essential to understand, and this is important, that they're not all the same. There are policies that limit what is included in the coverage, how much is paid out, and when the coverage kicks in. Make sure you speak to an expert on the matter to ensure you have the policy that best suits your situation. So next we have legislation, and this is really kind of a specific benefit to the education system. There's been a number of recent legislative actions taken by the federal government that you'll want to understand and see if you can participate in, and maybe some of you already are. In March of 2020, as part of the CARES Act, the U.S. Department of Education created the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. That's a mouthful, but the purpose of it was to distribute money to schools. In May of 2021, they revised its original guidance and specifically included cybersecurity. So if a school district is improving cybersecurity, quote, to better meet the needs of students related to preventing, preparing for, or responding to COVID-19, then it may use the ESSER funds for this purpose. In October of 21, President Biden signed the K-12 Cybersecurity Act. This directed the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, to create a cybersecurity information exchange. Let's start talking about what's happening. Let's get it all in one place so that we can make some decisions. Government doing something right. A K-12 incident reporting registry, which is the incident map I talked about, and then 10 million in annual funding for schools to take advantage of. There's currently an they're very clever over there, and they've decided to call the enhancement to the K-12 Security Act the Enhancing the K-12 Cybersecurity Act. So there's it's HR 4005 for anybody who's curious about that. But the punchline is they double the amount of money. So there's now 20 million available in federal funding if you qualify. So those are important things to be mindful of and take advantage of if you can, because some of these solutions are not always inexpensive. I'm sure many of you know. Okay, so we know about our three attackers here. What's the solution landscape look like for these things? We know that insurance, which we've talked about, or funding, those are great. We got to take them serious. We got to understand it and know how to implement them. But none of that is going to prevent a cyber attack from occurring. For that, you still need the good old-fashioned robust tools. You need awareness training. You need to make people are in the right mindset. So let's start from left to right here on this slide. Our old friend, Mr. Phishing. Can't stress this enough, training. It's a mindset change. It's no surprise, I'm sure, to anyone that the number one culprit is internal. Somebody does something they're not supposed to do, and it circumvents the tools, and bingo, they're in. So training is critical. There are a lot of good partners out there that can do various types of training. They can, many of you probably know about the social where they call in, ask if you can get have your passwords. There's all kinds of different training options there, and there's firms that do a very, very good job at it. Second phase of this would be email protection, or on the slide it says spam filtering, but having a good tool. Phishing comes in through email. We know that. So you want a tool that's going to do two things. Either stop the threat before the end user sees it, so there is no opportunity to click on a link or put in a credential or do anything that creates an incident. Or if something does slide through and it gets selected or clicked on, the tool's able to recognize it and quarantine it so that the damage isn't done. On our DDoS attacks, we've got proactive DNS protection, which sounds fancy, but it really amounts to that map that I talked about earlier, protecting it. Our goal is to make sure that services are running. There's nothing worse for a school or a business or a hospital than everything's down, right? That's the nightmare call you get. So there's a variety of strategies to defend against DDoS attacks, things like traffic filtering and blacklisting and shaping and authentication. So again, I'm going to say that finding a good partner is critical here, because you want to make sure you marry up the right strategies to your operation. And then on the far right, our diabolical friend, Mr. Ransomware. Endpoint EDR, you see right there, that stands for Endpoint Detection and Response. And if you want a little more clarity on that, you can think of it as, if you think of legacy antivirus software as just endpoint protection, then endpoint detection and response is endpoint protection on steroids, like the old school software, but beefed up a lot. You're collecting data, you're analyzing it. Sometimes you've got artificial intelligence making determinations based on the way things are moving on the network. And it can do one of two things. You can have it programmed to actually stop something from happening, or just to alert you so that a human being can step in and do the analysis. Intrusion detection and response is pretty much exactly what it implies, except from an external standpoint coming in. You're setting traffic patterns so that the device knows, here's what a normal month looks like. And then, what's happening over here? This looks like it could be something we don't want to pass. And you make decisions, you have configurations set up for actions to be taken when it detects that. On the forgive me. So multi-factor authentication. So what I would say about multi-factor is the same thing I said about cyber insurance. If you're not using it, you need to make this your next priority project. It's very common knowledge, and there's been a number of industry leaders who've all come to an agreement that MFA alone can prevent 99.9% of the attacks on your accounts. It's a layered authentication format based on 2 or more factors. This is the idea where there's a knowledge factor, which would be a password, something you know. There's a possession factor, which is something you have. So if any of you are using this either at work or maybe with a bank, you know that you'll get a text after you log in. Oh, is this really you? You type in a code and you go in. There's also an inheritance factor that can be used, which gets into biometrics or facial or voice recognition. If your phone does face recognition, then that's an inheritance factor. You can pull that out at the next family party and sound nerdy. But the punchline is that there's a lot of different tools for all 3 of these, but you need to be practicing them. It's always a good idea in these instances, in my view, to work with a trusted partner. I know a lot of really smart folks that run IT shops. Even when you have a good understanding of the technology and how it works, a second, third, or fourth set of eyes and opinions always leads you to the best outcome and the best decision point. Okay, so we got this figured out. I think let's recap here. We get some of this EDR, and then we do some email protection, and we implement proactive DNS and multi-factor, and then we just train the bejesus out of everyone. And that's going to give us the superior defense we need, but there's a pretty significant complexity cost that comes with that. Many of these solutions generate huge amounts of data, and in some cases, they can have heavy configuration ends. And even after you spend all the time setting it up and you're like, perfect, it's working exactly how I want, you're still going to need human beings to analyze the data that it's showing you, make sure it's performing the way you want it to perform, and defining different courses of actions as this whole security threat landscape evolves. With modern cybersecurity strategies, having a trusted partner is every bit as important as it was when we were talking about the right insurance policy or determining how to access federal funds. Schools don't typically have budgets that allow them to bring in high-level professionals whose only purpose is to manage, monitor, and report on security events. Usually the IT professionals that are on staff, I suspect many in the audience right now, are overloaded with everything else that goes on into running an effective operation, like making sure everything is working, continuing to look at new innovative ways to help schools accomplish their primary mission, which is teaching. So finding the right complement is how I would put it to your existing technology team is critical to get you that peace of mind where you know that your environment is secure and being watched over. So that ends my portion of the segment. I hope you found it informative, and I love to talk about this. So if anybody wants to continue this discussion, please reach out to Tracy and I will get in touch with you. But now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Mike Wojdilla, Proven IT's head of security, who's going to talk more specifically about some of the principles and approaches.
Thanks, Mike. Now that we've heard a bit about the prevalence and importance of cybersecurity today, I'd like to talk about some of the strategies on the forefront for defending against these threat actors. So zero trust may be something you've heard a lot about recently. It's a bit overused and misunderstood, so I'd like to try and provide some clarity around that. So zero trust is a security framework that requires all users, whether in or outside of the organization's network, to be authenticated, authorized, and continuously validated for security configuration and posture before being granted or keeping access to applications and data. Zero trust assumes that there's no traditional network edge. Networks can be local, in the cloud. You could have a hybrid environment with resources anywhere, as well as workers in any location. Zero trust puts a focus on always verifying all the time, regardless of the identity or the resource. Taking this approach can help limit the blast radius of a breach by making it easier to contain things like ransomware attacks, as well as minimizing access in a breach scenario. This framework can truly work to its full potential when we're able to get context from the entire IT stack to provide accurate visibility. One of the major ways that you can benefit from a zero trust model is through identity management. Identity management in conjunction with zero trust can provide huge benefits to security posture when facing challenges such as legacy systems, software as a service applications, unmanaged devices. Not only can this have an impact in preventing attacks such as ransomware, but it can also help prevent supply chain attacks, which are becoming increasingly prevalent and are equally, if not more, dangerous. There's a lot of challenges in relation to a SOC. It's prevalent across the industry as well right now. The demand for IT talent is high, and a full SOC team may not always be in the budget. Coupling zero trust with identity management can actually help reduce the workload and increase productivity and efficiency across the IT team. As the attacks become more prevalent and costly, we're continuing to see changes in compliancy. We're seeing changes in regulations in different sectors. Cyber insurance requirements have been increasing their stringency in regards to compliancy to qualify for the cyber insurance. Year over year, we're seeing different items added that would disqualify people from cyber insurance. So continuing to stay on the forefront of security and implementing those items in your network can keep you from being denied coverage. And if you're really ahead of the game, it could actually save you on the premiums for the cybersecurity insurance as well. Regardless of if you're on the cutting edge of defense or not, there really is no defense if there's no consistency. This is important from documentation to incident response to achieve the desired outcomes, determine areas of improvement, and just generally create a comfort level for everyone involved, whether it's a basic help desk type issue all the way to disaster recovery scenarios. We utilize NIST, they've proven, as the foundation for our cybersecurity strategy, and we focus on compliance, goal setting to achieve those kinds of results. Aligning the tools we use with the framework continues that consistent approach. So we trust CrowdStrike to protect our clients. They're the industry leader in EDR, utilized by the likes of Google, AWS. Their Overwatch team actually provides 24/7 threat hunting for us, and they've been able to put an extra set of eyes into the networks that we protect. As many of you may have heard of the new Felina zero-day vulnerability that's currently affecting Windows environments. It allows Office documents to be weaponized and the Windows support diagnostic tool to be used to allow remote code execution. As of right now, this currently remains unpatched by Microsoft and remains a major concern for almost all networks across the US right now. CrowdStrike has been able to protect our clients against this vulnerability since June 1st, which was just 72 hours from the release of this vulnerability. Just one example of how impactful the vendors that we choose and the people that we have as part of our supply chain can make all the difference. So how do we stay safe in an environment where trust can be so critical and yet such an available area for attackers to try and exploit? One of the most important things that we can do is surround ourselves with reputable vendors with proven track records that we can depend on. A trusted security chain who takes security seriously can make all the difference in helping stay safe. We've seen tremendous results on our end with ID Agent and their ability to identify compromised credentials before they are even utilized in a breach attempt. This has even translated into some success for some of our clients in their everyday lives for passwords that they were using across multiple logins. Catching these credentials in data dumps or credential sales on the dark web has had a strong impact on our security posture. We actually also had a unique ransom request where one of our clients had a threat actor contact them via email demanding a large Bitcoin payment. And the threat was that they would simply commence a DDoS attack against one of our education institutions until the amount was paid. But knowing that we would be able to trust Cloudflare to defend against this was a huge sigh of relief for the institution, as well as my team. We know how important security is and the challenges that you face. As Mike spoke to, school district networks are the perfect target for cyber criminals, generally a large amount of sensitive data, not typically security aware environments, maybe smaller IT teams with constrained budgets, but designing a security strategy and a layered approach that works the way you need it to is crucial to establishing a strong security posture. With users being the #1 way for a breach to occur, the importance of implementing solutions geared towards end user training and endpoint security cannot be emphasized enough. Disaster recovery planning and a solid backup architecture is also a key front to put emphasis on and is basically a necessity at this point. While some may stop after addressing these items, there's still so much to be gained from truly investing in the constantly evolving pieces such as access control, testing, incident response, and vulnerability management, amongst others. And as always, patch, and patch some more in your environments. So I appreciate you giving us some of your time today. I'm going to pass it back to Tracy to kick off our Q&A.
Thanks, Mike and Mike, for that information. So we're gonna open the floor up for any questions that anyone may have. Does anyone have any questions? If you do, you can type them in the chat. Or you can unmute yourself and does anyone have any questions at all? Okay. So first question, is there a recommended basic plan to start with cyber insurance?
Did you want to take that one, Mike, or did you want me to grab that one?
I'll handle that one. Without doing a risk analysis, I think the approach there would be you'd want to do a risk analysis first, and then you'd want to have someone that is an expert with cyber insurance assess the value associated with that, because it's really about the marrying up the dollar amount, no different than a regular insurance policy. How much do you need, right? If you're going through auto or you're going through life or anything else, no different here. And what a cyber insurance professional will be able to tell you is, based on your size of your organization and the risks we see in the sector, here's what some of the programs would look like. And then if you're inexperienced at that point, I would not allow just the insurance provider to dictate that. I would bring a third party in, a partner, to make sure that you're getting the best deal, or the best arrangement, really is a better way to say that. But it starts with assessing the risk.
Thanks, Mike. Are there any more questions from anybody else? If not, you can email me any questions that you guys may have separately. But thank you everyone for joining us today. My email is on the next slide, my contact information. Thank you. We have another event next week too.
Yeah, there's another question.
Oh, there we go. It was mentioned earlier that MFA is 99.9% effective in preventing breaches. Is that the most important part of the security program?
So MFA is definitely one of the most important things that people can have implemented in their network currently. It is almost a general requirement if you are going for cybersecurity insurance. Day to day, you know, as time goes by, you have these threat actors that are working on ways to bypass MFA. There are some methods that do exist to bypass multi-factor authentication, but that becomes a very sophisticated attack. So while MFA is incredibly effective, we still recommend a layered approach, because the more layers that you have to catch somebody in, the better your security posture is going to be.
Yeah, let me just reinforce that too and tie it to the last question. So the last question was, you know, what's the baseline kind of, or what are some of the base packages to go after? If you don't have multi-factor in place, I would be surprised if a provider would insure you. So that's the type, when I say risk assessment, we're going to be looking at, do we have MFA? Are we protected against these different things? And the providers are going to want to see a demonstration that, okay, they've taken as much action as they can, and we feel comfortable insuring them if something happens beyond this.
We'll wait a couple more minutes for any more questions that you guys may have. And if anyone is interested in having a demo of any type of cybersecurity, you know, a private meeting or anything like that, feel free to reach out if you have more questions. If
Yeah,
not,
maybe you're not even sure. Maybe you're not even sure where you stand, and you just want to have a conversation about it.
I think when it comes to cybersecurity as just kind of a general outlook, I think a lot of people are intimidated by cybersecurity and what may need to go into it to have an effective approach. And I think once you actually start taking the road towards a better cybersecurity posture, it actually becomes a lot easier than most people think from the outset.
thanks, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
So if there aren't any more questions, that ends our presentation. We also have another webinar next week focusing on business process automation. Please keep your eye out for that in your email. And in the meantime, if you guys have any questions at all, please give me a call or send me an email. But otherwise, we'll see you next week on June 16th at noon. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Oh, I didn't turn my camera back on.